she settled for. Well, we all make mistakes. My father-in-law said that about me at my wife's birthday dinner, right in front of everyone. My name is Michael Sterling. I'm 35. I run a company called Apex Capital Management. We handle $547 million across 23 different investment accounts. But that night, sitting in Richard's $8 million mansion, listening to him talk shit about me, I felt pretty small. The house screamed money. Marble floors, crystal lights, artwork worth more than most people make in 10 years. Richard's wife Margaret had planned this whole thing for weeks. Prime rib, expensive wine, the family sitting around their huge dining table. All the usual suspects were there. Harold, Richard's brother-in-law, some hotshot heart surgeon. Jennifer, Sarah's sister, corporate lawyer married to a hedge fund guy. Everyone successful. Everyone looking at me like I didn't belong. I'd been to dozens of these dinners. Same people, same conversations about how great they all were, same questions about what I did for work. But tonight felt different. Richard had an edge in his voice I hadn't heard before. Sarah just sat there stirring her cake. She didn't look up, didn't say anything. Just kept stirring like that cake could fix our marriage. What exactly do you do for work, Michael? Richard asked. You're always so quiet about it. The whole table went quiet. Sarah grabbed my hand under the table, not supporting me, warning me. I manage investments, I said. Investments. He said it like it tasted bad. Harold here just saved 3 lives in surgery today. Real work, real results. Sarah squeezed harder. My daughter could have married anyone. A doctor, a lawyer, someone who actually achieved something. He took a drink. Instead, she settled for, well, we all make mistakes. I looked at Sarah. She was staring at her plate, face red, embarrassed. Not of her dad. Of me. I stood up, put my napkin down. You're right, I said. She does deserve better. I kissed Sarah's head and walked out. Time to get to work. If you like stories about family backstabbing and smart revenge, hit that like button and subscribe right now. We post new stories every day and they keep getting crazier. This wasn't the first time Richard had shit on me. He'd been doing it for 3 years straight. Every dinner, every holiday. I tried talking to Sarah about it once. About 6 months after we got married. Your dad's getting pretty harsh, I said. Can you talk to him? He's just protective, she said. Give him time. How much time? Let me handle it. But she never did. The insults kept coming. After the 4th conversation that went nowhere, I stopped asking. Here's how I met Sarah. 5 years ago at a biotech conference in San Diego. She was giving a presentation on gene therapy to about 300 investors and researchers. Smart as hell. Really passionate about her work. I was there looking at medical companies to invest in. What I didn't expect was falling for the woman giving the presentation. After her talk, I walked up to her at the networking thing. That was impressive, I said. Most people can't handle that many technical questions. She smiled. You have to know your data. One weak answer and you lose credibility with everyone. We talked for 2 hours. Gene therapy, biotech investments, the future of medicine. She was brilliant. When I asked her to dinner, she said yes, but only if we could keep talking about the ethical stuff around genetic modification. Our first 3 dates were basically long academic discussions. Sarah was getting her PhD while working at some biotech company. She'd wake up at 5 a.m. to work on her dissertation, spend 12 hours in the lab, then come home and read research papers until midnight. I was fascinated. Most women I dated were mainly interested in the lifestyle my money could buy. Sarah barely noticed the expensive restaurants or that I never looked at prices. Sarah knew I had money. Nice house, no financial stress. But she didn't know how much money. I work in finance, I told her early on. Private investments. I don't like mixing work and personal stuff. That wasn't a lie. I just didn't tell her I owned the whole company. I'd made that decision after watching 2 college friends get screwed over. Mark's wife became obsessed with buying shit once she found out how much he was worth. Every conversation was about what they could afford next. Their marriage became a shopping spree. David had it worse. His wife went crazy with spending. When he tried to set some limits, she called him controlling. The divorce cost him $40 million and half his business. I'd seen how money could fuck up relationships. Turn love into a business deal. So when I met Sarah, I kept it simple. If someone could love me when they thought I was just a middle-class finance guy, that love was real. The irony? This decision led to my father-in-law spending 3 years insulting me for not being rich enough. Problems started our first Christmas as a married couple. Richard had too much wine and started grilling me about work. I gave him the same vague answers I gave everyone. I manage money for wealthy people. Richard decided that made me weak. Started making comments about my mystery job. Said real men are transparent about their careers. Sarah would change the subject or laugh it off. But she never told him to stop. The verbal attacks got worse. Richard would trash my clothes, my car, my lack of obvious success. He'd compare me to the other guys in their circle. Doctors and lawyers with expensive cars who bragged about their achievements. The worst part was watching Sarah shrink during these conversations. The confident scientist I married became quiet and apologetic, always making excuses for her father's behavior. But 3 months ago, I discovered something that changed everything. I was looking at potential investments when I found Biogen Dynamics financial documents. The company was bleeding money. 3 million burn rate every month. Only $11 million left in the bank. Their debt was 7 times their revenue, making them toxic to any serious investor. Biogen Dynamics was Richard's company. He'd been running it for 12 years. Under his leadership, it had become a perfect example of ego-destroying expertise. Their EBITDA had been negative for 14 straight quarters. They'd approached dozens of venture capital firms, but their numbers scared everyone away. Here's where it gets interesting. For 8 months, I'd been putting together a $20 million Series B funding package to save Biogen Dynamics. $12 million in equity, $8 million in convertible debt. Anonymous investor. Richard had no idea his salvation was sitting at his dinner table, listening to his insults while his daughter stayed quiet. The drive home from the birthday dinner gave me time to think. I sat in my driveway for 10 minutes and made my decision. I wasn't signing those papers. I was going to let Richard Blackwood learn what it felt like to need someone he considered worthless. The due diligence I'd done on Biogen showed me just how bad Richard was at running a company. Their cash flow statements told a story of systematic mismanagement. Over 4 years, Richard had consistently overspent on marketing and executive compensation while cutting research and development funding. The company was spending $800,000 annually on business development, mostly Richard's travel to conferences and networking events. Meanwhile, their R&D budget had been slashed by 30% over 2 years. The Neurotropin failure was just the beginning. I found documentation of 3 other promising drugs that had been rushed through development and failed at various stages. Each failure cost between $2 to $5 million and destroyed relationships with pharmaceutical partners. Richard's leadership team had a 60% annual turnover rate. Exit interviews consistently mentioned toxic work environment and ego-based decision-making. The company's patents were solid. They owned rights to several promising treatments. But patents don't make money if you can't develop them properly. What made it tragic was that Biogen's scientific foundation was excellent. Brilliant researchers, great facilities, cutting-edge technology. Under competent leadership, the company could have been hugely successful. Instead, Richard's arrogance was destroying everything his employees had built. The Alzheimer's drug disaster was a perfect example. Biogen's research team had found a promising compound but recommended 18 more months of testing before approaching the FDA. Richard decided they were being too conservative and pushed for immediate clinical trials. The compound failed phase 1 trials spectacularly. Not only didn't it work, but it caused serious side effects in 40% of test subjects. The FDA issued a clinical hold that prevented Biogen from testing any related compounds for 2 years. The $15 million Novartis partnership disappeared overnight. Richard called an all-hands meeting after the failure. Instead of taking responsibility, he blamed the research team for not preparing the compound properly and the FDA for unrealistic safety standards. 3 senior scientists quit that week. 2 others got fired for attitude problems when they questioned Richard's explanation. The Neurotropin launch followed the same pattern 2 years later. Different drug, same arrogance, same devastating results. Next morning, I called my lawyer, William Martinez. I need 3 documents, I said. Withdrawal notice for Biogen, termination of the funding deal, and permission to tell them who I am. You sure about this? William asked. You spent 18 months on this deal. I'm sure, I said. Sometimes the best investment is the one you don't make. By noon, everything was ready. William would deliver the bad news to Biogen at 10 a.m. the next day. I wanted Richard to have a full day to panic before he understood what had happened. That night, Sarah came home around 8. She'd been staying at her sister's since the birthday dinner. Dad called, she said. He's worried he went too far. He wants to apologize. Maybe we can have dinner this weekend? Start over. Start over? I almost laughed. How long have you been embarrassed by me? I asked. I'm not embarrassed. You've never told your dad to stop insulting me. Not once in 3 years. He doesn't mean it. He's just protective. He called me a mistake in front of everyone. You said nothing. Sarah started crying. I didn't know what to say. He gets angry when people confront him. So you picked his comfort over my dignity. That's not fair. But it was fair. Every time she stayed quiet, every time she made excuses, she was picking her dad over her husband. I love you, she said. Love isn't enough if you won't fight for it. She left an hour later. I knew she wasn't coming back. Next morning at 10:04 a.m., William confirmed the withdrawal notice had been delivered to Biogen's headquarters on 17th Street. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Michael? Sarah's voice was shaking. Something terrible happened. Dad's company just lost their major investor. $20 million just vanished. That sucks, I said. The lawyers won't say who pulled out. They're claiming confidentiality issues. Dad's talking about bankruptcy. I stayed quiet. You work in finance? Can you ask around? Maybe find out who this investor was. Perfect. She was asking me to find myself. I'll see what I can do, I said. After hanging up, I wrote 2 text messages scheduled to send at 10 a.m. the next day. One to Sarah, one to Richard. Both would tell them exactly who their mystery investor was. That evening, I went through the Biogen files one more time. What I found confirmed everything about Richard's terrible business judgment. The company had been hemorrhaging money for 18 months, ever since Richard pushed through a product launch despite warnings from his research team. He'd overruled his own scientists, convinced his business instincts were better than their technical expertise. Biogen's lead compound, BG127, had failed phase 2A trials with only 23% effectiveness. The disaster cost them partnerships with 2 major pharmaceutical companies and nearly $3 million in development costs. But instead of accepting responsibility, Richard blamed the research team, fired 3 senior scientists, and started shopping for new investors to bail him out. Richard had fired 11 senior scientists in 2 years, giving Biogen a reputation as a career killer in the biotech community. What made it worse was that Sarah had been one of the scientists who opposed the Neurotropin launch. I called her former colleague, Dr. Patricia Webb, who'd left Biogen around the same time. "Can I speak freely?" Patricia asked when I explained why I was calling. "Please. Richard Blackwood is a disaster. Brilliant scientist, solid research, but the man has no business running a biotech company. He treats research staff like factory workers and makes decisions based on ego instead of data. Give me an example. The Neurotropin launch? We had 6 months of testing data showing the compound wasn't stable enough for clinical trials. Sarah wrote a 20-page analysis explaining exactly why it would fail. Richard ignored it, pushed forward anyway, and lost the company nearly $3 million when the FDA rejected it for insufficient safety data. What happened to Sarah? Richard blamed her for the failure, said she was being negative and uncommitted, made her work environment so toxic she had to leave. Sarah is one of the most talented researchers I've ever worked with. After I hung up, I sat in my office until midnight thinking about everything Patricia had told me. Richard hadn't just insulted me at family dinners. He'd destroyed Sarah's career because she had the courage to tell him the truth about his bad decisions. The $20 million I was prepared to invest wasn't just going to save his company. It was going to reward him for years of arrogance and poor judgment. Next morning, I got to work early and did one final review. Everything was ready. At 9:45 a.m., I called Sarah. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "I need to tell you something important. Sit down. You're scaring me. I'm the anonymous investor who pulled out of your dad's company." Dead silence for 37 seconds. I counted. My company was prepared to invest $20 million in Biogen. "I changed my mind yesterday morning." "That's impossible. You don't have $20 million. "Sarah, I own Apex Capital. We manage $547 million in assets. I've been your dad's mystery investor for 8 months. I could hear her breathing fast. "If you're that rich, why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted to see how your family treated someone they thought was beneath them." "So this was a test?" "I was going to invest until your dad called me a mistake and you said nothing." Sarah started crying. "I should have defended you. But this is my dad's life. You can't destroy it over hurt feelings. This isn't about feelings. It's about consequences." At 10 a.m., both text messages sent. Sarah's phone buzzed at the same time. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Please don't destroy my father." "I'm not destroying him. I'm letting him deal with his own bad decisions. This is cruel. What's cruel is watching your husband get shit on for 3 years while you do nothing." Sarah hung up. 5 minutes later, Richard called. He was screaming before I said hello.
"You son of a bitch!"
"You think this is funny? Destroying my company because your feelings got hurt? You misunderstood something, Mr. Blackwood. I understand everything. You're the investor who screwed me." "That's right. 23 people work here. You're willing to destroy 23 families because I said some things you didn't like? I'm willing to let your company succeed or fail on its own without my money keeping it alive. We had a deal. We had paperwork I chose not to sign. Nothing illegal about that." Richard went quiet. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller. "What do you want?" "Nothing. There has to be something. Money? An apology? I want you to understand how it feels to need someone you think is worthless." I hung up and turned off my phone. But the calls from Richard kept coming over the next few days. He left 6 voicemails on my office line, each one more desperate than the last. "Michael, this is Richard. I know we've had our differences, but I need you to call me back. This is urgent. Michael, it's Richard again. Look, I may have been too harsh at dinner. I was drinking. I said things I didn't mean. Please call me. Michael, I'm begging you. 23 families are going to lose their jobs. Whatever I did to offend you, we can work it out." By the 4th call, his voice was breaking. "Michael, please. I know I was wrong about you. I can see that now. You're obviously successful, obviously capable. I misjudged you completely. Just give me a chance to make this right." The final message was barely coherent. "Michael, I'll do anything. Public apology, whatever you want. Just please reconsider. The company. My life's work. It's all going to disappear." I saved every voicemail. Not to be cruel, but because I wanted to remember what desperation sounded like coming from someone who'd spent 3 years making me feel worthless. 3 days later, Sarah filed for divorce. She came to the house while I was at work and packed her stuff. Left a letter saying she couldn't be married to someone who would hurt her family on purpose. But here's what she didn't mention. She also stopped talking to her dad. The morning after I revealed who I was, Sarah showed up at my office unannounced. My assistant tried to stop her, but Sarah pushed past and walked into my conference room where I was meeting with clients. "I need to speak with my husband," she said, shaking. "It's an emergency." I excused myself and followed her into my office. Sarah was crying, mascara running down her face. She looked like she hadn't slept. "I've been thinking all night," she said. "About everything you said, about all the times I should have defended you." "You're right. I was a coward." "Sarah, no, let me finish. I chose the easy path every time. I told myself I was keeping peace, but I was really just protecting myself. I didn't want to deal with Dad's anger, so I let him take it out on you instead." She took a shaky breath. "I know it's too late, but I called him this morning. I told him exactly what I thought of his behavior. I told him he'd destroyed our marriage with his arrogance." "What did he say?" "He hung up on me, but I needed to say it." According to Patricia Webb, Sarah's confrontation with Richard happened after our divorce was finalized. She drove to his office and delivered a speech that had been building since her days as his employee. "You destroyed my marriage," she told him. "You destroyed my career at Biogen. You've spent years tearing down anyone who challenged your ego. Now you're dealing with the consequences of your own arrogance." When Richard tried to interrupt, tried to blame me, Sarah cut him off. "Michael was offering you $20 million to save Biogen. $20 million from the man you called a mistake for 3 years. I sat there and let you do it. I picked your comfort over my husband's dignity. I'll regret that forever." She walked out of his office and never spoke to him again. Within a week, news of Biogen's money problems spread through the biotech community. 2 more investors pulled out, scared by the company's debt ratio and the sudden departure of their lead funding source. Richard had to fire 8 employees and close his second research facility. The Denver Business Journal wrote about the company's struggles, focusing on the mystery investor who disappeared. By the end of the month, Richard was selling his $2.8 million Cherry Hills mansion. The country club membership was gone. The Aspen vacation house was gone. Everything was being sold to buy time. I drove by his house one afternoon during the estate sale. Richard was standing in his former driveway, watching strangers go through his belongings. Furniture, artwork, even kitchen stuff had bright orange price tags on them. He looked broken. The confident, arrogant man who'd lectured me about success was now haggling with bargain hunters over the price of his wife's jewelry. Margaret had filed for divorce 2 weeks after the bankruptcy. She moved in with her sister and refused to speak to Richard. After 25 years of marriage, she wasn't willing to go down with his sinking ship. 6 months later, Biogen went bankrupt. Richard managed to sell some research to another company, but his business was dead. The remaining employees either got fired or absorbed by the buyer. Richard took a consultant job with a bigger biotech company, working out of a tiny office in a strip mall by the airport. The guy who spent years lecturing me about success was now driving to the kind of anonymous office space he used to mock. The biotech community's rejection was swift and complete. Richard's name became synonymous with ego-driven mismanagement. When he applied for jobs at other companies, his reputation preceded him. No serious firm wanted to hire someone who'd destroyed a promising company through arrogance. Sarah moved to California, got a job at a research institute. She's doing well now, publishing papers and speaking at conferences again. She found her voice in science, just not in our marriage. I sold the Denver house and moved Apex Capital to Seattle's Belltown district. The Pacific Northwest tech scene offered plenty of investment opportunities. Seattle was different. The tech scene was dynamic, focused on innovation instead of old money connections. My investment approach, careful analysis and respect for expertise, worked well with startup founders and established companies. Apex Capital's Seattle office occupied the top floor of a modern building with views of the bay and mountains. It was a different kind of success than the traditional wealth Richard represented. More collaborative, less hierarchical. I found myself drawn to biotech startups run by former academics, scientists who understood both technical challenges and business realities. Several of the researchers I funded were former Biogen employees who'd left during Richard's reign of terror. Dr. Patricia Webb joined one of my portfolio companies as chief scientific officer. Over lunch one day, she told me that former Biogen scientists had started calling themselves Richard refugees, talented people whose careers had been damaged by association with his failures. "You know what the saddest part is?" Patricia said. "Richard actually had good instincts about science in the early days. But success made him arrogant, and arrogance made him stupid. He stopped listening to people who knew more than he did." I never heard from Richard again, but the business journals kept me updated. Every failed venture, every missed opportunity, every time someone chose not to work with him because of his reputation for making bad decisions. Richard Blackwood learned what it's like to be dismissed and ignored by people who control your future. He found out that respect isn't something you can demand or inherit. You earn it by how you treat people, especially when you think they can't fight back. The lesson stuck with me. Every decision I made in business came back to one principle. The smartest person in the room isn't always the one with the most money or highest title. Sometimes it's the quiet expert everyone else overlooks. Richard spent 3 years teaching me that lesson the hard way. Sometimes the best revenge isn't planning something complicated. Sometimes you just step back and let someone face the natural results of their own character. And sometimes the most worthless person in the room is actually holding all the cards. If you liked this story about justice and not underestimating people, smash that like button and tell me in the comments what you think about Michael's choice. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit subscribe and the bell for notifications about new stories like this. Thanks for watching. See you next time.